Okay, so welcome to this YogaSpace reflection session. And in this session, we will be, I'll be holding some space for you, encouraging you to reflect on your experience of this month in YogaSpace, of the concept that we've been exploring in various ways and practicing using as our lens of awareness. That concept this month has been asteya, non-stealing. We've been approaching that in particular by exploring the concept of abundance and scarcity, the idea of being enough, having enough, and so on. So before we reflect, let's just a little bit more consciously arrive into and settle into this space. So if you feel comfortable to gently close your eyes. If that doesn't feel okay, let the gaze be softer and cast down. Start to bring your awareness to your breath. Just observing the breath in its natural rhythm, so that you start to have a sense of arriving into a deeper, stiller place within you, a place from which you simply observe. Whenever you notice the mind has been distracted away from the breath, use that noticing to guide your awareness back to the breath. And now shifting your awareness to the concept of asteya. So just as you have been watching the breath, I invite you now to watch, to observe the thoughts, responses, feelings, whatever it is that comes up for you as you contemplate the concept of asteya. Maybe you recall experiences you have had over this past month in relation to asteya. Maybe some thoughts come up for you around what you have reflected on in your exploration of asteya. Maybe there are some feelings, some emotions you can identify that come up in response to this concept. So still have this feeling of being in that deeper, stiller space from which you observe, and just let whatever comes up as you contemplate asteya, let it come up, notice it without attaching to it, just observe. And now let that go. And take your time, so no rush. Whenever you're ready, gently opening your eyes or lifting your gaze. If you want to take some deeper breaths or move the body a little before you open the eyes, feel free to do that. So I invite you to take a moment. So hopefully you have pen and paper with you, journal, whatever. If not, then take a moment to grab that now. And to take a couple of minutes now to write down any responses that came up during that brief meditation, where I invited you to just notice your responses to the concept of a stayer. So yeah, just taking a couple of minutes to do that. Whatever came up, maybe it's just like one thing that came up and you just want to record that or write it over and over. But my invitation to you is to see if you can keep writing for the next 2 minutes. So I'll start the time in a moment, and then I'll stay 2 minutes. And my invitation to you is to just see if you can keep writing. So it's not that you're kind of analytically attaching to something that comes up and trying in an intellectual way to kind of develop it, but more of a kind of just allow the consciousness to come. So whatever you write down, it might initially be what came up during that meditation, but then can you just go with it, just like you would observe thoughts without attaching, without trying to control them. Just keep going, just keep writing for 2 minutes. See how you go. You might write one word over and over again. That's fine. There are no rules. So we'll start now. That's halfway through the time. Okay, and then leaving it there, even if it feels like you're itching, that the pen is itching, continue. Let that go. And so invitation to both of you, either of you, to share anything that came up in that.
The first thing that came into my mind, because and I've shared this before with you, Heidi, that it's felt really, really important. The whole idea of being complete. they're already being complete and yet growing and becoming. There was something terribly important about that and very healing, I think, in verbalizing that and internalizing it.
Mm.
So that was the first thing. But then I was also felt quite challenged by the idea of envy and lack. And I would never have described myself as an envious person. But then I began to realize that in sort of different shapes and forms that it can be there. Sort of aware of that now and can sort of stop and think, yeah, was that, what was that about? So yeah, I think it's been an extraordinary concept, this, and really important.
Thank you, Trisha. That thank you for sharing. And it's a couple of questions for you around that. So that being complete, I mean, I agree. It can be a very powerful thing to kind of be confronted with. Like it can almost feel like a challenge. Like, well, almost feels like the ego and it goes, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So to really kind of allow yourself, like to give yourself permission to kind of to to accept that. So I guess one question, this can be for both of you, and we'll yeah so for both of you to think on or respond to is, are there times over this past month where you've particularly kind of noticed that either you've drawn on that or where that's felt challenging to accept or embrace? And if there aren't, that's fine, but just helpful to reflect in this session.
It definitely has. It has definitely been there on occasions. I'm really struggling to think of actually of a particular occasion, but it's definitely been there, and it's something that I find myself, being quite often sort of challenged and also reminded of, and it's a wonderful feeling if I can connect to it, and particularly on a beautiful morning like this. Even when the rain, which is going to be later, but sort of being in contact with that sort of feeds the feeling of abundance and completeness. But yeah, there have also been a number of times about lack that I have been aware of. But yeah, I can't give examples because it's just difficult to. So
Yes, and it doesn't, and it's not really about that, and like obviously you're welcome, both of you, to share whatever you want to share in this space, but it doesn't, it's never really about the detail, is it? It's about the experience. And so I think it's interesting to reflect on, even when we're faced with quite a powerful concept that might really that may well resonate in lots of ways, like, yes, this is a powerful concept for me to accept and take on board, and then to recognize and notice that it's not that easy. It's not just a sudden kind of like, oh, flick a switch and I will always know and feel and believe and embody this idea of being complete, because of course we have a lifetime of these grooves, what in yoga is called samskaras, these deep grooves of the habitual ways of thinking about ourselves. And of course this is all tied into the careful construction of the ego, and this concept of being complete is radical in terms of, it's very threatening to the ego, that wants us always to be striving and grasping. And the other thing just to mention on what you fed back, Trisha, was that idea of envy. Like, I don't think any of us want to think of ourselves as envious, but you think of it as like, the kind of like almost as one of the deadly sins. It's not something you never want to, like, I don't think any of us would want to kind of stand up and say, yes, I am an envious person. But of course, that's not what we're saying. We're saying like we're acknowledging that the experience of envy is a very human one. We may, and if using other words for it makes it easier for us to kind of accept and recognize that happening, by all means we can do that. But again, it's that ego mind response of like, no, I'm not an envious person. And also that, that can play out in so many forms. Often the kind of the false modesty can be a form of that, the kind of like, oh, I can't do it like you can do it, like you're better at that than me, and that can sound all quite nice and non-threatening, but really at the heart of it, it's the same thing, isn't it? So Elizabeth, is there anything that you want to respond to on any of that?
I actually totally agree with Tricia. And I remember at the beginning thinking, I am whole and complete and constantly growing and becoming, and thinking, what is that? And I think this month for me it's been quite a challenging month, a busy month. But I think picking up from Tricia, I have to say there have been 3 or 4 times where envy has come in. And interestingly, it's been very much church orientated, in as much as I've been to 3 or 4 different things with couple on my own, but finding that when I got there were these groups of people, church people, and I suddenly thought, yes, there are groups within wherever you go, there are groups. And do I want to stay more individual, or do I want to be part of this group? And, that's quite challenging at the moment. But on the other hand, I think with this whole yoga space, it's more important that I go back to me, because I think I've always gone out to others. So I think it's back. What is it I really want? And I think the the February one and the March one have so joined together for me, of being honest, of being realistic to myself. And I think this honesty has also been coming up this month of, is it envy, or is it just that recognizing that within another big group of people, there are smaller groups that have been there a long time. There are friends, they have been, and do I, and I'm sure they'd allow me to join them if I wanted to, but it's quite a mixture. And I think the second thing for me that's come up very strongly, it's certainly come up in the last week or so, is gratitude. I think gratitude of I think I mentioned it to you on Monday, the gratitude of, I mean, again, it is church orientated, but in my view at the moment, the church and the Holy Spirit and the spirit and the heart and everything is very much connected. I think that's why I'm probably feeling quite overwhelmed by it, because it's such a joint mixture. But I mean, on Sunday, I came out on this Passion of Christ, and it was pure music, silence, quiet, and the words that we all know, but they were so simple, because they were, I know music is very important to me, and it was a mixture between music and then these verses. And then Monday and Tuesday I went to St. John's Passion, which, I mean, just it floors you really, because it's just so powerful. And I think, for me, I've come away feeling gratitude that firstly I can go and be there, and I can be in amongst people, and yet feel there's something within me that is working well. And I think it's, as I think I said to Tricia in the week, that I think I just feel my heart is just very full, and I don't quite know. It's almost bursting with abundance, really, and gratitude. And yet it's been a very busy month, and a very, you know, a lot of poorly friends, and quite a few challenges as well. So don't know what that sounds like. I mean,
thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for everything that you've shared there. And just picking up on a few things. You mentioned about the kind of the joining with Satya. I agree. I think that Satya and Asteya, and you could argue Ahimsa as well, like these first three concepts, and of course they all all of the concepts will explore, interweave beautifully. But again, there is a reason that although there is no linear sense in this, but there is a reason that these are the three concepts, I think anyway, that we are first introduced to, because there's a sense of like, if you can kind of grasp these and start to really take these on board, all else will follow. And I was just thinking when you were sharing there, Elizabeth, that it feels to me like what you're describing is a, you know, because you mentioned it's been a challenging month. It's been a, you know, challenging for all kinds of reasons, and a busy month. But it feels to me like what you're describing is that you have this kind of foundation that's supporting you, so that whatever comes your way, whatever challenges there are, however much busyness there is a foundation there of gratitude, of a sense of abundance. You know, when you mentioned about there's something within me that's working well, so the theme that really kind of came through for me was this feeling of like of really falling back on yourself, like of having that strong sense of self. So I love that, you know, it's almost like great imagery, thinking of these groups of people, and yes, you might or you might not like join in with those groups. The point is that first and foremost, you have yourself. You are already whole and complete, you know, and so and from that place and that sense of abundance of I am already whole and complete, more abundance tends to come. So and just in terms of picking up on some of that stuff, you know, thinking about, you mentioned groups of people at church, and I guess a question, not just for that, you know, this can be just a helpful question to ask ourselves, I think, particularly when we notice that the ego mind is coming up and kind of challenging that sense of I am whole, complete, I'm living my truth, and so on, is what are you making that mean? You know, like what meaning are you attaching to whatever it might be, something someone has said, or the fact that you're observing groups that seem quite close-knit, or, you know, what are you making it mean? You don't have to answer that now. It's just a question that you might even want to jot down as one that I find, like, I personally, I find it quite a challenging question to respond to, and therefore I know it's a good one to try and respond to. But, you know, particularly when I'm feeling stuck, or, you know, I'm aware that I have kind of drifted away from that center of, you know, feeling like I am, you know, fully rooted in that sense of abundance. truthfulness, my own truth, when I feel I've drifted away from that, in my response to something that's come up, whatever that is, then asking myself, like, what am I making that mean, can be a helpful question. And if, like, I also appreciate it can seem like, I remember when I was first asked it, so I was first asked this by my teacher and mentor, and my response was like, I don't really understand the question, like, what do you mean, what am I making it mean? But I guess, when I unpacked that more, it was around, well, one way I unpacked it was to then kind of like almost do a thought experiment of following different trajectories of I don't know, if it's something that someone had said to me and it had landed with me in a way that didn't feel good or something, then what am I making that mean? Well, I've kind of absorbed it in some way that where actually what I'm thinking is that person doesn't like me, or that person hates me, or that person whatever, and actually when I kind of challenge that assumption, it's like, on what basis, and do they really, and just really kind of challenging and pushing back on myself. So that's just one example, but equally it could be something where I'm anxious about something, and it's like, okay, so how do you think this thing is going to play out that you're really anxious about? I don't know, going through airport security, never something that I enjoy. Okay, so what could happen there, that and just kind of, yeah, challenging myself to not just do the shortcut of like, oh, that's a negative thing, or that's a whatever, and just leave it there, but to really hold myself to account in terms of my responses. I don't know if any of that helps, or if that was a bit of a ramble, but if anyone wants to.
I just think that I think it's the mixture, because I think YogaSpace has brought me much more to myself and thinking of myself. And I think the challenge has been since COVID that the years I was not in groups, the years that I wasn't involved in church, the years, or U3A or anything, that groups have always been there. So it's for me, it's actually, because I suppose I've been an individual anyway. I can go to places on my own anyway. But it's actually, these groups are very tight and very they're not all tight. That's not fair. They've been there a long time, I think, and the friendships are good. So it's I don't know, I can't really say. All I know is that it's an area I find, do I want to be in more amongst groups, or actually do I actually want to find more of myself? And I think it's that I have that dilemma, because I think I was out of a group for so long that I don't know. And I think when people came back from COVID, they went back to these natural groups, which I didn't have. I think that's, people, rightly so, oh, great, we've been out for 2 years and now these are all my friends, and we click the button and off we go again. And I didn't have that. I felt, yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, but I don't feel anxious about it. I don't feel it's something that it's enormous, but I have been aware of it. I've been to 3 or 4 things and I have been aware of it. How I handle it, how I challenge it.
Yes, and I think this is the thing, and I've no doubt that you would be with or without YogaSpace, you would be paying attention to this stuff. But I think part of what we're trying to do in this space is create that space for these things to come up, and for you to give them space, because what you're talking about here, this about groups, about like, do I join, do I, like, you know, about this kind of where do I go next in terms of connecting with others, it's providing space for that, isn't it? You know, and I love that you've just said, you know, it's not like it's not something that you're kind of worried or anxious about. It's something that you are aware of, and that's wonderful. From that space, you can like keep that, you know, you're not turning away from it. You know, there's a reason this is coming up, and so where you can then hold that without anxiety, without feeling like it's something to be fixed or something to be ignored, and it feels to me like that, you know, that the kind of concepts we're exploring in YogaSpace and how you're experiencing those are helpful in terms of like where you are at when you are then bringing these kinds of things into your awareness, contemplating what, you know, what am I making that mean? Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. You know, tell me if that's not right.
That's right. Yeah.
Trisha, is there anything?
Just one thought. I just when you were talking, Elizabeth, I'm like, because I can really relate to this, and this, I was just thinking about, you know, this idea that somehow, you know, the phrase "the grass is greener on the other side." That, you know, and I was just sort of thinking that maybe it's helpful to reflect on how would life be different if I was a part of this group. What would it actually mean? What would it be?
Mm-hmm.
And just reflecting on that, because that's a place that I've been since we moved, and of course not knowing anybody and being in a different place. What is it? What is, I suppose for me it's saying, what is the lack? What is it I'm trying to fill that would be met by doing X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, I think you've hit the spot. I think that's exactly right. That's what I've come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. The lack, you know, what is the lack? You know, that's you know, and of course very relevant to what we've been exploring this month.
I don't want to go into a group when I feel that then I'm not my true self. And it's I think this is why this yoga space is so I think I'm thinking about it all the time, really, but there we go.
Good. Excellent.
Not sleeping as well.
Can I use that as a quote? This yoga space is
but be warned, you may not sleep well.
Yes, may affect sleep. But that's you know, that's such a beautiful recognition to have, Elizabeth, about, you know, that whatever connection you make with people, what you're prioritizing there is that sort of truth, being true to yourself. I love that. Yeah,
it's great.
Okay, so the time has
shot
by. Before we just more consciously close this session, is there anything that either of you want to share or ask that you were hoping to, that you haven't in this session?
No.
There are so many different ways to reflect, so I'm trying to kind of, you know, just bring a bit of a different format to each reflection session, and then of course you have it on recording, and if anything that we're doing you know, so often the conversation will then go free range, but if anything that we're doing in those sessions feel helpful for you for reflection, of course you can always then make use of, you know, that question you pose yourself or whatever it might be for subsequent concepts. So, you know, this doesn't need to then just languish or, you know, as a relevant only to a stayer, this session. Again, you know, just a reminder, this it can be easy for this to feel like, oh, we've just had a nice chat about, you know, a stayer and how things were this month. Just like when you do Shavasana, it can feel like, oh, I've just had a nice lie down. And of course, what we know, and what I, you know, think you both know, is that actually there's so much more. Like, this is a powerful thing. This is what helps with the integration. So you know, obviously we'll have you'll have your individual coaching sessions, but what I do encourage you to do, if you haven't already, is just to reflect on where you're at with a stayer, with this, particularly with this idea of abundance and scarcity right now, as we come towards the end of the month, and whether there's anything, or like where you're going with it now. You know, does it feel very, very much like, no, that's with me now? You know, that's something that I'm, you know, like you were describing earlier, Tricia, you feel like it's something that you keep noticing, whether you're noticing that it's not there or it is there, that, you know, that awareness is there, and that you feel confident you're going to like take that beyond this month. Whether there's something very specific that comes up around, like, this is what I want to focus on. So I know when I sort of first explored a stayer in this kind of really active way, you know, particularly a stayer off the mat, and I was exploring abundance, it drove me to growing more vegetables in the garden. You know, like that sort of connection with growing, like, felt really helpful. Like, so I'm not suggesting you do that. I mean, by all means do. It's a great time of year for it. But so there might be something specific as well. So the main thing is, I just encourage you to rather than just like, oh, we'll leave that there onto the next concept, just to check in with with that kind of integration piece. So if you both have just a couple more minutes to spare, we can close this session. Well, mindfully, I completely understand if you need to dash off. We've overrun on this session. Otherwise, if it feels comfortable to gently close the eyes. Bring your awareness to your breath. Take a moment now to shift your awareness so that rather than watching, observing your breath, you now start to watch, to observe your thoughts as they come up in response to the concept of a stayer. So that may be thoughts about things that we've just spoken about in this session, things that you've journaled about, things that you've thought in this session but we haven't discussed. Just have a sense of watching those thoughts come up and let them just pass on by. So acknowledge those thoughts. It may be feelings as well. Feelings may come up. Acknowledge them, let them go, knowing that you can return to them at any time. Have a sense of being stepped back and just watching, acknowledging thoughts, feelings coming up in response to a stayer. Now letting that go. And just contemplating once more. And as I say this, just really hearing it and just having a sense of embodying, really taking on board the idea that I am already whole and complete. And I am constantly growing and becoming. Take a moment to be with that. Now bring palms of the hands together in front of the heart. And take a moment in gratitude to yourself for the time, the energy, the commitment, the engagement that you have brought to this month in Yoga Space. And gratitude to yourself for showing up for yourself this month. And if you want to take a moment to contemplate anything else that you are grateful for in this moment, then take a moment to do that now. Now bowing your head towards your fingertips, releasing your hands, raising your head, opening your eyes whenever you're ready. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to share with you and support you in this month's module. I'll look forward to catching up with you individually in your coaching sessions. And of course, we have a new module to look forward to from next week. And just one last comment, actually, because it crossed my mind earlier. It's just interesting the way this has fallen with Easter coming up as well, you know, which I appreciate is a really potent time. So that feels quite a lovely synchronicity. So
yes, absolutely.
So I wish you well, particularly over the next few days.
And you, Heidi. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care. See you soon.
Bye.